Now, where I want to start today actually is on the assignment that you're currently working on for me. And I mentioned in the specification that there's a README that you need to complete, and that I'd give you a template for that README. So I'll just quickly run down through the template that I put up on GitHub, and I'll post the URL of this repo onto Slack for you. So you can just clone the repo. The repo has nothing other than the README file, and you can just copy the contents of the README file and fill it out essentially. So I'm just going to talk just briefly. It should be fairly self-explanatory, but just in case you have any questions. So this is the template that I want you to follow. Okay, just specify your full name. And then in this section here, as the heading suggests, I want you to list in bullet point form the features that you have developed for the Movies app that you're going to be testing for me in this assignment. So just list the actual features, a short statement of each new feature, whether that be a new feature or an adaptation of an existing feature that was in the Movies app provided in the Web App Dev Labs. Actually, just give me 1 second because I want to show you the source for this as well. So I just want to start up VS Code. And I want to just grab the source. I should have done this actually beforehand, but let's see. I think it's in here. Okay, I'll come back to the source in a second. I'll just talk my way through the document itself. So that's fine. That's in that section. And then in this section, you'll be telling me a little bit about the automated testing that you've done. So here, what I'm getting at is any unique functionality that you have developed for your Movies app. I want you to, let me say, what did I say? Briefly explain the parts of your app's functionality that are unique and state the associated testing file names. Oh yeah. So tell me, just state what are the particular features or functionality that you have developed that are unique in the sense that they weren't provided in the Movies app that was developed in the Web App Dev Lab. And it's yeah, I'll say no more than that, right? But also tell me exactly which test file in your testing files is aimed at that particular functionality and the testing of it. Admittedly, now it should be fairly obvious from the name of the file, but just do it anyway. So this is what I want you to document. Just name the feature. So just as an example, let's say favorite movies tagging. Now that's a feature that was already developed in the Movies app in the lab, so you won't be mentioning that, but just state the feature and then a brief statement on it as to what the purpose of the functionality is. I mean, up here, I'm just getting you just to state them in bullet point form, maybe just name them rather than give an explanation of them. Just name the features that you developed here. Whereas here, you're just slightly expanding on those features that are I'm categorizing as unique. You're giving it just this one sentence, or at most 2-sentence statement of the nature of this new unique feature or functionality that you've developed. And this is Maria, the actual file, test file, that contains the testing for that feature. And repeat that then for every unique, what I'm calling unique piece of functionality that you have developed. I'll just pause maybe as I walk my way through this in case there are any immediate questions that hit you. No? Okay. If you have done any error or exception testing in your automated testing, then tell me where I can find that. So I'm saying here, state the cases that demonstrate error and or exception testing. Exception testing, if I give you an example, do I give an example here? Yeah, I'm giving you sort of examples just to explain what I'm trying to get at here. So I'm saying, and this now is related to a feature that was already developed for you. So I'm saying in the displaying of the favorite movies page, when there are no movies selected as being the user's favorites, that's a simple example of an exceptional case. Now, we know the page works, but to actually write a test to cover that case would be an example of an exception test use case for, in this case, the favorite movies feature. The second example is more in the case of error handling. Error handling is usually related to where the user provides input and they provide input that is essentially invalid. And so we should have in our React code, we should have error checking within our React code. And so from a testing point of view, we should test that the error handling code that is built into your React app is actually working properly. So an example of that would be for the submitting the movie reviews, which was again a feature that was developed in the Web App Dev 2 lab. So the test case is exercising the submitting of a movie review web form when certain fields are left blank, for example, which presumably should be checked for in your React code, but make sure that that works. We should write a test against it. And so on. If you have them, and whether you had time to do error exception handling or not. Again, I only want you to tell me about these error and exception handling cases for the particular functionality that you have developed, rather than what was developed in the labs. If you did, if you remember, one of the features that I mentioned in my specification for this assignment was this thing called Cypress custom commands. The idea was that you had to actually read up a little bit on it. So if you did get an opportunity to implement some Cypress custom commands, then again, tell me where you're actually using them in your testing code. I can find the command implementations myself because they have to go into a particular subdirectory if you read up on this, but I just want you to tell me which particular test files our test specs are using your custom command implementations. So it's just a series of bullet points. Code splitting, tell me where there's code splitting going on in your well, this code splitting is changes that you would make to your actual React code now, as you know. So tell me exactly where you have examples of code splitting going on in your React code. Again, give me the names of the files that has code splitting feature implemented in there. Pull requests. when I was talking to you last week, I said, well, you have to actually go over to GitHub if you want to use pull requests. But as one of you mentioned to me, you can do pull requests on the GitLab platform as well, except it calls them merge requests. But so what I'm saying here is specify the URL of the, if you did achieve or satisfy the pull request requirement in my assignment specification and you did it on GitHub, then I just want to know the URL of the GitHub repo. That's really all I'm asking you for here. If you did your pull requests on GitLab, in other words, merge requests, then just simply state that that I will find the merge requests in your GitLab repo. I can find where your GitLab repo is because that'll be contained within the local Git repository anyway. So this is just going to be either a URL that you're going to give me here, or a one-line statement saying that you've satisfied this particular requirement that I had on you. You've satisfied it on the GitLab side of things rather than the GitHub side. The last section is what independent learning have you carried out in order to complete my assignment? That would be kind of aimed at the upper grade band. I think I don't have the specification of the assignment open here now, but I think my grade bands were good, very good, excellent, and outstanding. So this would mainly be in the outstanding category, but you may have read up on some particular aspect of Cypress or CI/CD, GitLab CI really. You may have read up on something and used it in your GitLab YAML file that I didn't cover in the labs. And so you would mention that to me here as well. And, oh yeah. So I think in terms of completing this README, it won't take you more than, I would say, an hour or maybe an hour and 30 minutes. It's mainly kind of bullet points. It's either bullet points here. Here it's okay. It's bullet points again. Here it's a numbered list, and here it's bullet points. So you know, there's really very little in terms of completing this README. What you're also getting, what I'm giving you here is, I don't know if you've written anything in Markdown. The way we write this document for either GitHub or GitLab is we write the document. I'm calling this README a document now. We write it in Markdown form. That's the MD file extension that you see here. And, you know, in this sample Markdown file, we have examples of a heading, a subheading. We have examples of how to generate bullet points. This is another subheading. This is a subheading, if you like. More bullet points. Here we have examples of bolding. Sorry, of bolding. More bullet points, bolding, etc., etc. Numbered lists. And at the very bottom, I'm showing you, if you do want to include an image in the README, the image in this case now is not relevant to this text up here, but you may want to include an image as part of either this section or some of the other sections. How do I include an image? And so to answer all of those questions, you really have to go back to the source for this file. And the source, when you clone this repo and open up what you've cloned, open up inside in VS Code, and what you'll get is essentially this file here that you're looking at. So the way you get headings is by preceding the heading with the cardinal symbol, the symbol here. make sure there's a space after the hash symbol, I guess is a better name for it. So a single hash gives you a main heading. A double hash gives you a subheading. A triple hash gives you a subheading, and so on and so forth. So you can have as many hashes as you want to, but the more hashes you have, kind of the smaller the heading becomes, or the less significant. If you want to bold something, then precede it with 2 underscores and terminate it with 2 underscores. So anything between a double underscore is bolded. If you want to have bullet points, then just begin the line with the plus symbol, and each of these then will become a bullet point. If you want to have a numbered list, then the way you do it is just begin each line with 1 dot, 1 dot, 1 dot. And what the Markdown compiler will do is it will keep track of the numbering for you. So you don't have to go 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot. You can just start them all off with 1, and Markdown knows what you're trying to generate here is a bullet point list, and it will actually keep track of the numbers for you, because whereas I just did 1 dot, 1 dot, 1 dot here, when it was actually rendered on GitHub, it was numbered properly for me, as you can see here. Again, you may have written Markdown before, so this may not be of any, may not be new to you. How do I include an image is the final thing. And the way you include an image is you use this kind of, where is it now? Sorry. Oh yeah. It's kind of odd syntax really, but that's the syntax that you use, and you just specify the path name of the image file itself here. So you can see the image file in my case is down in a subfolder called images, and I've just got a sample image in there. You might want to put the images inside the public folder. I don't really care where you put the images, really. Now, this README is going to be part of your project folder structure, if you like. It's going to be part of your what you'll be submitting to me as your overall project. And your overall project will include your React code, your Cypress code, your GitLab CI YAML file, this README file, and anything else that's of relevance to your particular submission. I'm going to pause again in case there are any questions. The final point I will make is it is your responsibility to make sure that, you see, what happens at runtime is, well, not so much runtime is, okay, here you're completing the README inside in VS Code, and you commit that to the local repository, and you do a git push up to GitLab. And what GitLab, or if it was to GitHub, it would be GitHub, what they do is they convert this Markdown into HTML. So this is the raw Markdown file, but what's rendered up in GitHub or GitLab, they both do the same. What they render is a nice HTML version of your Markdown file. Now, you are responsible for ensuring that the rendering is formatted correctly. You know, so I don't want to see things like feature 1, feature 2, feature 3 appearing all here in one line because you didn't use the bullet point formatting properly in your Markdown file. So I would maybe suggest that get one of your classmates to read your README file just to point out any formatting errors, and you can reverse that role with whoever you're working with. Okay, you don't have any questions. That's fine. So eventually I'm going to start the actual lecture. And the topic for this week is back to CI/CD yet again. And in this case, though, we want to look at CI/CD in the context of the backend, or in our case, which will be a web API. So there's slides that I'm going to go through, which are not that many really, because we've covered the theory side of CI/CD at this stage. So a lot of what we've covered already applies whether you're talking about a front end or a back end application. And I'm conscious of the fact now that you have begun web API development in the Web App Dev 2 module. Also, even though I don't like talking about the next assignment, even because when you haven't completed the first assignment yet, but the second assignment is essentially to implement a CI/CD pipeline as well as automated tests for the Web API assignment that you will get in Web App Dev 2, in Web App Dev 2. But let's not worry about that for the moment. That's what's coming down the line, I guess. Just give me 1 second now, please. Now, in Web App Dev 2, when you're doing your Web API development, you're using, for example, a tool called NodeMon, and you're also using a tool called BabelNode. Just give me 1 second again. You're using NodeMon and you're using BabelNode, and they're great when you're in development mode. NodeMon, as you know, what it does is it monitors any changes to your files in your Web API development, and if a file changes, then it recompiles, essentially. It recompiles your Web API and makes that available to whatever server you're using. NodeMon actually does the watching part. It watches to see have you made any changes to your source files as you're doing your development. What BabelNode does is it compiles your source code and runs that code on the Node platform. You see, the Node platform itself, it doesn't understand some of the modern JavaScript syntax. However, we'd like to use modern JavaScript syntax in our source code, but if Node doesn't understand it or is not able to execute it, then how are we going to bridge that gap? And the way we bridge the gap is by using BabelNode. What BabelNode will do is it will take your modern JavaScript syntax and convert it back into ES5 stroke ES6. I guess maybe it's ES6 at this stage. Similar to the problem that we have with front-end development, where the browser didn't understand modern JavaScript either, and we had to do a compilation. So that's what BabelNode does for the backend for us. And that's great when you're in development mode, but clearly you can't use these tools can't be part of your production environment. And so what we have to do is we have to build or create a build version of our web API. And we know what that is related to when it comes to CI/CD. So there's going to be the build in the context of a CI/CD pipeline for a web API will be involved using Babel, not BabelNode now, but Babel itself to compile all of your web API's source code, compile it back to ES5 form. That's okay. Down here, I'm saying, well, as a rule of thumb, we tend to have one test file per endpoint in your web API. That's just a usual rule of thumb. So however many endpoints you have in your web API, you have one test file for each one. Also, what we should be aware of or conscious of in our test automation is making sure that each test case runs in isolation and are independently of every other test case. Now, what that translates to in relation to a web API is essentially repopulating your database at the beginning of each test case, because a database really is what stores the state in the context of a web API. So we need to reset, if you like, the database every time for each test case. So inserting some sort of before each hook, the code that's going to go in there, as we'll see, I think probably maybe next week or the following week's lab, we'll see code that carries out that role for us. It'll just repopulate our Moodle, our MongoDB database tables. Just a reminder of the difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment. The idea with continuous delivery is we're saying it's a development discipline where you build your software in such a way that the software can be released to production at any stage. But the can be really means that it's over to some individual to decide, project manager more than likely, to decide whether to release a particular build of your web API, release it into production. But it's a manual step, it's not automatic. Whereas in a continuous deployment environment, every time your CI pipeline runs, then the new version of the web API is deployed to production automatically. So clearly, continuous deployment is a much more sophisticated CI/CD pipeline than a continuous delivery. By more sophisticated, I mean that the particular software house has a more finely tuned CI pipeline, which probably includes some manual quality assurance checking built into it as well, using pull requests or whatever. And we know this slide as well from before, like how do we achieve continuous deployment stroke continuous delivery? We're saying that the test must be, there must be continuous integration. That's okay. We must run the automated tests, which is that regression testing idea. We must deploy a build of the application. So in this case, it would be a build of our web API. We must deploy it to a production-like environment. And we call this production-like environment a staging environment. That's going to be very important now for our web API CI/CD pipeline. So we need to have a staging environment or a staging platform, as well as the production platform, let's say. We can release new versions of the application to production. Okay, at the push of a button, that's all right. Why do we need this? I think we've answered all of those questions before as well, so I'm going to skip over that. So this is kind of a summary, kind of a slight adaptation of the CI/CD pipeline. So we're going to have a build. There might be an install stage here as well, but the build stage now, as I was talking there at the earlier part of the lecture, the build will involve taking all of the source code of your web API and compiling it down into an ES5 version of it. But Babel will do all of that for us. We'll run some sort of automated tests, so whether they be unit tests or integration tests. I'm not being specific here, but there is some significant amount of automated testing that it would be in the next stage. And if all of your tests pass, the next stage in my pipeline is to deploy the web API to what we're calling the staging environment, which is probably some cloud platform that we deploy it to. And again, as I've mentioned before, the staging deployment is only available to the actual development team itself, and maybe a small subset of your end users. A chosen few of the end users can actually play with the application and give feedback to the team about new features that we might have developed or adaptations of existing features. Having deployed the application to a staging environment, the pipeline may actually run some more tests, because over here we're kind of testing the built version of our web API, maybe running on local host, whereas here the tests are actually aimed, or the target of the test is a properly deployed version of our web API. And there may be differences between the two, you see. So this test might pick up errors that this set of tests did not. They may be the actual same tests, but the deployed version of the web API may throw up some errors that the local running version of it would not have. And the final stage then is deploying your web API to production. Now, this might be an automatic thing, or it might be a manual step, hence the difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment. Here's another kind of visualization that I put together to explain what I'm trying to get at here. So now the flow is, here you've got your developer. They do a commit to the local, their local Git repository running on their local machine. At some stage, they will do a Git push, in our case, up to the GitLab repository. We now know that when we push to GitLab, the GitLab CI service will run our CI/CD pipeline, and the latter stages of this pipeline, according to this picture here, will involve deploying the web API to some hosted platform. Now, the platform that you're going to be using is a platform called, do I mention it there, called Heroku. I've just arbitrarily chosen this platform. So Heroku is a service, cloud service that we can use. And amongst other things, we can deploy web APIs to that platform. But we're going to have two, Heroku calls them apps. We're going to have two apps running on Heroku. One of them is going to be the staging app. The other one is going to be the production app. This is how we're going to kind of simulate what happens in real life, if you like. This app would only be available to the development team. This is the version of our web API that's available to the outside world, if you like. And what I'm trying to get across here as well, by means of these green arrows and red arrows, is that anything that's green is automatic. So deployment to this staging environment here happens automatically, however, the deployment to the production environment is either automatic, if in the case of a continuous deployment pipeline, or it's manual in the case of a continuous delivery pipeline. And they're not necessarily separate pipelines. The same pipeline can handle both of these options by using a branching policy, which I think I mentioned on the next slide or somewhere further on these slides. So the last stage of the pipeline execution, which is deployment to production. Okay. In other words, this stage here, I'm saying that stage it's a manual step in the case of continuous delivery. That's okay. Down here, I think I'm kind of repeating myself, but I'm saying that the staging and the production hosting platforms should be mirror images of each other. And that may seem like a straightforward thing, but in some cases it may not be. It may be quite difficult to get exact mirror images of of the same platforms, because there may be a lot of configuration of the platform that you have to do. Doesn't really apply in our case. We do set up 1 or 2 environment variables, and so we've got to ensure that the same set of environment variables are declared for our staging app as for our production app. One difference between the two that you can never get away from is presumably the production app is using a separate physical database from the staging app. So trying to ensure that the test data that you have in your staging database is a good reflection of the typical kind of data that you would have in your production database. That may be straightforward, that may not be straightforward. Either way, you try and keep your production and your staging deployments as close as possible mirror images of one another. All I'm showing you in this screenshot here is when we're using GitLab, then the way we notice whether a particular stage is a manual stage or an automatic stage is, if we just zoom into it a little bit, maybe. So, and you will be doing this in a lab coming down the line. So this pipeline, I think this is probably an install stage. This is a build stage. This is a test stage. This stage is deployment to the, sorry, where am I now? Sorry, this stage here is deployment to the staging platform, which is automatic. The last stage is deployment to the production platform, but I've set that stage as being a manual stage. So somebody has to, and the way GitLab reflects this is it's using a slightly different icon. This icon will never go to a tick mark. It'll never complete. It's essentially waiting for somebody in the development team to essentially click that button. It's a button essentially, and the clicking of the button will trigger the execution of this stage. And in our case, that this stage is going to try deploying my application to the production platform. So this is how you know whether a stage is an automatic one or a manual one. It's just a slightly different icon. It's not so much a button. Yeah, it's kind of a go symbol or whatever. And you will implement a pipeline that's quite similar to this in a lab down the line, as I said. So the last stage of the pipeline, in the case of continuous deployment, the last stage is automatic. And I did allude to the fact there that you can, within the one GitLab YAML file, you can define your continuous delivery and continuous deployment pipelines within the one physical file, if you like. You don't have separate files for them. And the way you achieve it is simply by means of a branching policy. So, for example, you might decide that it's only when you might have 2 branches, the main branch and a develop branch. There would be other branches as well, which are feature branches. But the branching policy you might follow is whenever a change happens to the develop branch, then we want to run our entire pipeline, but the deployment to the production environment does not happen automatically. It's a manual step. However, when we make a change to the main branch, then the last stage of the pipeline, deployment to the production environment, should be automatic. And it's possible to declare your pipeline so that it satisfies both of those requirements. And I think you saw in the GitLab lab that we did that you can use a branching policy and attach a branching policy to the various jobs that make up your pipeline, so that certain jobs run when one branch has been modified, whereas other stages run when some other branch has been modified, i.e. the main branch and the developed branch. So it's some sort of variation of that technique is how we achieve both continuous delivery and continuous deployment within the one pipeline definition. Now, as I said, we're going to be using Heroku as our platform for deploying our web API to. So what I want you to do is to go to this website and register on the Heroku for the Heroku service. What I'm showing you, all I'm showing you in this slide is a screenshot from a pipeline stage that is implementing deployment to this Heroku platform. And again, you will be doing this in a week or two time. But so, you know, okay, it's just YAML in this case. So what we need to do essentially is we need to get our pipeline, this particular stage, we need to get it to install certain packages, if you like, not node packages now, but operating system packages. So in the before script stage here, okay, I'm updating the operating system for any patches. And what I'm doing here is I'm installing the Ruby programming language. And the reason I'm installing the Ruby programming language is because I want to install this tool called DPL. DPL is a tool that we will use, or that GitLab will use, to facilitate deployment of an app or an API to the Heroku platform. And it's these lines here then take care of this particular line here, actually. This is the line that takes care of deploying your web API to the Heroku platform. We needn't look at the detail of it now, but here I'm using the tool that I've installed up here. This is all running now up on GitLab. You don't need to install these things on your local desktop. And okay, there's some environment variables that are being used here, but so it's as straightforward as that, really. This one-liner will deploy your web API up to Heroku. That's assuming that you've already created your Heroku account and you've created an empty app up in Heroku. But the lab will step you through that. Now, okay, Heroku is another cloud service, a bit like GitLab, and it's a service that does potentially charge you for using it. But what little you will be availing of it, hopefully you're not going to incur any costs. But just in case, there will be some minimal costs. But to keep the cost down to a bare minimum, what I'm asking you to do here is to go to this website and enroll on this GitHub student development pack. So make sure you use your set2 email address now when you register, both on this and also when you register for the Heroku service. Use your set2 email as your username. And what this GitHub student development pack does is it essentially gives you free credit on lots of cloud services, including Heroku. Unfortunately, it doesn't cover GitLab, which is unfortunate, but it does cover Heroku and many others. And you will, if you go to this website and scroll down on this particular page, you'll get a list of all of the services that this development pack covers. That only covers you. It only covers you for a certain amount of usage of the particular service. So you can also go, you should also go in now and register for this development pack. They usually turn it around fairly quickly, but it might take a day or two. Okay, I can't really talk through this slide because this slide assumes that you've done a certain amount of your web API development in the Web App Dev 2 module. And I know from looking at the tutor's website that Roseanne uses that you haven't gotten to the stage that would allow me to discuss this. Okay, so it's all theory, but if I go back to here, last week I talked about automated testing of a web API. Now you've yet to do a lab on that, admittedly. You've got a good sense of CI pipelines. The only thing you don't know about is how do we do deployment. And I've given you a screenshot here, but I'll give you the actual code. I've given you a screenshot of how you do auto deployment to the Heroku platform. So we've got pretty much all of what we need to know in order to almost fully implement this CI/CD. And this is a proper CI/CD pipeline because it has the CD part to it. But yet again, it's not until we do it in a lab that hopefully this all kind of gels together for you. Right, I am going to leave it at that for today. Again, I'll just pause in case there are any questions either about this or about what I was talking about at the beginning of the lecture.
Hey, Jeremy, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. My mic didn't work earlier, I think. I just wanted to ask a small question with the assignment.
Sure.
So, how much would the CI stuff be worth exactly? Because I know like the main focus is Cypress and CI for this assignment.
You should be able to get that though from the spec. If I just bring up the spec, not an exact percentage, but just give me 1 second to get the spec up. Now, so this is the, let's see, sorry, so even in the 40 to 60 grade band, like I'm mentioning that you have to have this much of the pipeline working, but that's literally what I've highlighted there. You can achieve that by just copying the YAML file that you have from, is it last week's lab or the week before?
Mm-hmm.
Take that YAML file, copy it into your assignment project folder, create your repo up on GitLab and just do a git push to GitLab and just confirm that the pipeline runs to completion.
Okay, yeah, because I added component testing to my one, and for some reason, whenever I do component testing, it also tests like the cache, and then the pipeline fails at the end. So,
I don't expect you to have the component testing as part of the pipeline.
oh, okay,
Yeah, that can be left out of the pipeline.
all right then, okay.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's probably the same thing with the Firebase as well, because with Firebase, it just like dragged on for like 4 or 5 minutes each time. So what happened is that like I used up like a lot of my minutes, and I'm at the point where like I have to pay if I want to run the pipeline again almost.
Okay. The Firebase authentication. Are you just saying that the Firebase is just slow to respond to requests? Is that what you're saying?
It's
Buried within your tests?
It's no, it's like when I try to start the emulator in the pipeline, it drags. So then like it doesn't go on to the next stage. And I just kind of like if I don't include it, then like the tests for the login and like sign up will like possibly fail.
Why are you using an emulator?
That's I asked Rosanna about it and she said that like that was completely fine because she mentioned that like I don't need to have like the database set up because we haven't like talked about that yet.
Oh, right, the Firestore stuff.
Yeah, no, I just use an emulator just to like run the login and stuff like that.
Okay. So you, for this assignment, you are just using Firebase for authentication,
Yeah,
correct? Um,
because that's what the assignment asked for. Didn't ask for like database stuff.
no, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so I'm not clear in my head as to where the emulator comes in. I would have thought your React app will just be issuing HTTP requests to Firebase, unless you're talking about. Well, sorry, I'll just complete it. Your React app is sending HTTP requests to Firebase with some user credentials, and Firebase comes back with a success or failure.
Yeah.
So that's, in a sense, that's not that much different from your React app sending HTTP requests to TMDB, and TMDB comes back with success or failure. I'm not
You know,
clear.
it's just that like with the emulator, it's like if I if I like log in, it would just say like an error message saying like authentication not like running or something instead of like
Okay.
saying oh wrong password or wrong username or username already exists type of errors.
And are you starting up the emulator as part of your pipeline?
I had it, yeah, but it would just drag.
Oh yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah.
So I like it just drags and like if I comment out like the start emulator like stage or whatever, then like the tests won't pass.
Okay. What you should do is in the independent learning section of the README for my assignment, just to explain what you've just been talking to me about now,
Okay.
which is kind of as a reminder.
Okay, that's fine. And also a few I was talking to a few people in my course and some of them are a bit like they were just wondering if they could get like an extension for like a few days
Hmm.
because
Let,
web app got delayed by like a week as well. So
the web app is
June next week, I think.
I think it's 26th. Is that the date, or is that moved?
Um,
If I bring up the
I'll check
calendar,
my calendar.
so mine was meant to be the 22nd, and I haven't been talking with Roseanne for a couple of days now, but I thought her date was the 26th, or has that moved?
Uh, it used yeah, it's 26th. It used to be on the 19th. Now it's 26th.
Okay. So 22nd. If I made it the 25th,
Yeah, I'll let them know because like personally, I'm mostly done with it.
yeah.
But I know like everybody else has been struggling a little bit. So
And is there a time of day for Roseanne's submission? Like, is it midnight or is it something?
it's midnight, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, 11:59 p.m. Sunday.
Okay. Maybe I should just go for broke and just say I'll align my deadline with her deadline.
Okay.
Keep it as simple as that. Um, but there's absolutely no movement on that though. Yeah,
Okay.
that,
That's fine.
that's fine. Okay. Anything else from yourself or anybody else, I wonder? No, right. I'll touch base with you again tomorrow.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you.